Hi everyone, good day. Welcome to my channel, Bar Cues for Dummies, where I will be providing some tips and at the same time review sessions to be able to help us prepare ourselves for the upcoming bar examinations, whatever year may that be. And so, without further ado, let us start. Now, I'll be discussing Article 1, National Territory, where I will be focusing more on bar question and answers. Of course, we have heard that from our professors, even bar passers would say that it's really good to practice ourselves by answering questions from existing bar examinations before. So let us start now. Before that, this will be the flow of the presentation, bar question, suggested answer, and as a disclaimer, by the way, bar Q&As are actually copied from references verbatim, word per word. So what I did is that first there will be a reading of bar question and then suggested answer, and after that there will be a rationalization of the answer where I will be using the ALAC method. So A is basically, for those who do not know what ALAC method is, A stands for answer. This is basically your answer to the question. So most questions in exams are categorical questions. So you have to say yes or no, but it doesn't stop there. You also have to support that with L, which stands for law. These are basically the provisions, and then this is the basis why you have answered that question. So this will basically test your knowledge of everything. All right. And then thirdly, we have application or analysis. This is where you're going to combine the facts of the problem and then relate that one to the provisions that you have selected, or basically to the law or statutes that you have selected. And lastly will be the conclusion, or basically a rephrase or a summary of your answer. So one sentence will actually do. And I'll also be discussing some of the cases. So I'll be discussing the facts, the issue relevant to the question, and then at the same time I'll also be discussing on the decision of the Supreme Court, but only if it is applicable and used by the bar question and answer. All right, so let us start now. I'll be discussing first with Archipelagic Doctrine. So this is found in the 1989 bar examination. And this is the question. Allow me to read it. What do you understand by the Archipelagic Doctrine? Is this reflected in the 1987 Constitution? So there are actually two questions here. Number one is that you are asked in terms of your understanding, or basically what is the definition of Archipelagic Doctrine. The second one is more of like a follow-up question. So is Archipelagic Doctrine reflected in the 1987 Constitution? So the first thing that you will have to do is first to define that one, and then second to answer the follow-up question whether or not the Archipelagic Doctrine is stipulated or is mentioned in the 1987 Constitution. All right, so this is the suggested answer that I have acquired from references. So this is quite long actually, and let me read it first before I discuss this. So, Archipelagic Doctrine emphasizes the unity of land and waters by defining an archipelago either as a group of islands surrounded by waters or a body of water studded with islands. For this purpose, it requires that baselines be drawn by connecting the appropriate points of the outermost islands to encircle the islands within the archipelago. The waters on the landward side of the baselines, regardless of breadth or dimensions, are merely internal waters. Yes, the Archipelagic Doctrine is reflected in the 1987 Constitution. Article 1, Section 1 provides that the national territory of the Philippines includes the Philippine archipelago with all the islands and waters embraced therein. and the waters around, between, and connecting the islands of the archipelago, regardless of their breadth and dimensions, form part of the internal waters of the Philippines. So, quite lengthy, right? So, what I did is that I actually made it short, simple, and I also have followed the ALAC method. So, first, let me discuss the rationalization first. All right, so what I usually do when I have to define a very difficult term, or for example, when I have to memorize a term that I do not understand, I need to break down, I need to analyze that first and understand what do we mean by, for example, archipelagic doctrine. So, first is we define what an archipelago means. And when it comes to archipelago, I always remember Charlene Gonzalez's answer when he was asked, how many islands are in the Philippines? And then she answered, high tide or low tide. So, this is actually my strategy when it comes to memorization of concepts. I usually associate that one with some of the things or objects or probably symbols that would connect that term or concept so that it is easier for me to remember it all over again. And when we say archipelago, it's a group of islands, small or not, or an area of sea in which there are many islands. So this is from Cambridge Dictionary. And Philippines here is an example of an archipelago. That is why, same with Miss Charlene Gonzalez answer here, it is consists of some 7,100 islands and islets. And Miss Charlene Gonzalez, she's actually more specific in her answers. Next here is the analogy of archipelagic doctrine. Now that we understand what an archipelago means, that Philippines is an archipelago consisting of some 7,100 islands, we will now discuss what do we mean by archipelagic doctrine. So think of it as a family compound. You see the houses there, you see it as islands. This actually represents islands, and then the land there, the earth or the ground, this is basically body of waters or ocean, sea, whatever it is. And then the fence here is actually the important analogy, because without the fence, anyone can just simply enter the territory. They can just walk onto the spaces. And the fence here represents the archipelagic doctrine. Because imagine without a fence, you don't see the house as one entity or probably as a family compound, but you see the house as watak, right? That's the same with the concept of archipelagic doctrine. So to unite the group of islands here, the 7,100 islands, what we are going to do is to draw an imaginary baseline. And the baseline here is the yellow line. So what they did is that they tried to draw it on the outermost islands of the country. So they just simply connected that one, and here comes the baseline. So this is basically the essence of archipelagic doctrine. It helps unite the lands and waters and form part of the country's territory. Next is that for the follow-up question, we were asked, is it stipulated in the 1987 Constitution? So you have to think, what specific article is it in the 1987 Constitution? So basically, of course, obviously, it's Article 1, National Territory, and it can be found on the second sentence. The waters around, between, and connecting the islands of the archipelago, regardless of their breadth and dimensions, form part of the internal waters of the Philippines. Okay. So combining all of these concepts that we have learned, using the ALAC method, this is my answer. It's quite long. It's up to you whether you wanted to make it short and simple. You can do that one, but I just want to make it more comprehensive. So, archipelagic doctrine unites the land and waters by defining an archipelago as a group of islands surrounded by waters. To emphasize unity, an imaginary single baseline is drawn around the islands by joining appropriate points on the outermost islands of the archipelago. With this, all islands and waters enclosed within the baseline form part of the Philippine territory. And then for my follow-up question, I I have placed it on the second paragraph. Yes, the archipelagic doctrine is reflected in the 1987 Constitution. Article 1, Section 1 provides that the national territory of the Philippines includes the Philippine archipelago with all the islands and waters embraced therein, and the waters around, between, and connecting the islands of the archipelago, regardless of their breadth and dimensions, form part of the internal waters of the Philippines. Thus, the archipelagic doctrine stipulated in Article 1 of the 1987 Constitution unites the lands and waters to form part of the Philippine territory. So, my last sentence is basically my conclusion, summing it up based on my understanding. Alright, so if you have some comments, if you have some alternative answer, please comment down below. And for my part 2, still I'll be discussing Article 1 National Territory. So if you are new to my channel, please click the subscribe button. And I hope to see you again for my next video. Bye for now.